All right, here we are at day 1 of our reading of The Lion of Mars by Jennifer L. Holm. Each day we're going to read a different section of the book together. You should have a copy of this reading schedule. And today on day 1, we're going to read the prologue and chapters 1 and 2. So the prologue starts on page 1. So we're going to keep going past our table of contents here. And here is page 1. And this is our prologue. Now you also have a bookmark with you, so I'm going to use our bookmark to help us keep track. Via secure communication. Date 3/5/2091 from Commander Dexter. To U.S. Terrestrial Command. Message, situation report. The surface digicam at the northwest quadrant of the settlement has been destroyed. The pole supporting it was knocked over as well. It is my conclusion that this was done deliberately by a hostile actor. Please advise. Cy Dexter, Commander, Expeditionary and Settlement Team, United States Territory, Mars. Chapter 1, Nest. The trip to Mars was the hardest thing they'd ever experienced. That's what the grown-ups said. The small, cramped ship, the constant fear of something going wrong, the knowledge that they could never return to Earth. But honestly, it sounded like a cakewalk compared to sharing a bedroom with Albie. Because he snored. I hadn't had a decent night's sleep since Albie started bunking with me. I tried just about everything to block the noise. Earplugs, sleeping under the blanket, even a thick hat with ear flaps, but none of them worked. It was surprising because Albie was perfect. He was easygoing and did his chores without complaining. Of all of us kids, he was the least likely to throw a fuss. The grown-ups trusted him, even Cy, but it turned out there was one thing Albie wasn't good at: sleeping quietly. And I didn't know which was worse, Albie snoring or Trey wanting to change rooms. For as long as I could remember, Trey had slept in the bed across from mine. My drawings of cats and his drawings of aliens had papered the walls. Our plastic models crowded the shelves together. Then, 2 months ago, Trey suddenly asked to switch bedrooms. Next thing I knew, Trey was sleeping across the hall in the older kids' room with Vera and Flossie, while Albie was snoring in mine. And me? I wasn't sleeping at all. Neither was Leo, from the looks of it. The old cat was sitting up in bed, flicking his tail in annoyance. This room-switching thing had happened once before. Back when Trey and I were little, the grown-ups had moved us boys into one room and the girls into the other. Albie was older than me and Trey, so he was allowed to stay up later. The problem was that Albie would make a lot of noise when he came to bed, and he'd wake us up. The experiment was abandoned after a week. Now, all these years later, Albie was keeping me awake again. Across the room from me, Albie let out a loud, waffling snort. I groaned, pulling the pillow over my head. "Albie," I said. He didn't move. "Albie," I shouted. He sat up abruptly, looking around the dimly lit room. In confusion. Albie was tall with broad shoulders. Darby said he would have made a good football player. Football was an Earth game where you threw around a ball and knocked into people. I didn't really understand it. "What's wrong, Belle?" Albie asked, his hair sticking out crazily everywhere. It was always funny to see him without his Dodgers baseball cap. He only took it off at bedtime. "You're snoring," I said. "Oh," he said. "I thought there was an emergency." "It is an emergency. I can't sleep." "Oh, I'm so sorry, Belle," he mumbled and laid back down. I promised not to snore anymore. It was hard to be angry at Albie. He was kind and gentle, a big teddy bear when it came right down to it. A big, snoring teddy bear. "Ah, dust it," I muttered. Albie could have the room to himself. I grabbed my blanket and left, Leo padding after me. Not that I blamed him. Even a cat couldn't take Albie snoring. Leo and I walked down the twisting corridor, our way lit by the cool blue light of nighttime. The light changed to mirror the time of the day. In the morning, the blue would transform to a warm, bright yellow. This was supposed to help us have a sense of time because the settlement was mostly underground. It had been built in a giant lava tube, a massive cave-like space left behind by flowing lava millions of years ago. It was the perfect pre-built habitat, keeping us safe from the surface dangers of Mars: radiation, extreme freezing temperatures, and dust. The interior walls were constructed from a space tech gray rubber that curved gently, flowing from one room to the next like a smile. The rooms were round, almost bubble-like, for improved structural integrity. Cy told me he'd thrown out the old rules when he designed the settlement. Apparently, on Earth, people lived in boxy structures with hard corners. Earth sounded sharp to me. This corridor was a history of my childhood. There was a spot where I banged into the wall with my scooter. The scratches on the ceiling from when I tried to take my toy spaceship fly. It didn't work. And of course, the ruler on the wall where Memes recorded our growth with a thick black pen. She joked that as some of the first human children to grow up on Mars, we were a living experiment. Farther down the way was a board of digipics of us when we'd arrived on Mars. We were much older now than the babies on the wall. Albie was 17, the oldest in Earth years. Then came Flossie, 16, Vera, 15, Trey, 14, and me, 11. I might have been the youngest, but at least I still knew how to have fun. Unlike the older kids who'd become moody grumps when they turned 13. Of course, in Mars years, we were much younger. It takes Mars 687 days to go around the sun. So, a Mars year is 687 days, which meant I was only 5 and Trey was 7. Ahead of me, Leo stopped to sniff at something, his tail flicking in the air. When I was little, there had been a lot of cats. Bella, Moki, Harley, Sesame, Little Cat. As the years went by, the cats died, and Leo was the only one left. But I still remembered them all. Then, Leo and I were leaving the children's wing and passing the shared areas, the recreation room and the mess hall and kitchen, that bookend the two sleeping wings. The recreation room was illuminated by the flickering light of a digireel that someone had left playing. Like the rest of the settlement, the room was painted a pale blue. It was supposed to be a soothing color that mimicked the Earth's sky. There was an L-shaped couch with a loop rug woven from old clothing. Darby had created the rocking chair from plastic barrels. Everything was recycled on Mars. Even the paint that decorated the room was made from algae paper. Although it was getting old and the leaves had become brittle and started to crumble. Aside from the couch and rocking chair, there was the small plastic table we had played at when we were little. These days it held Flossie's sewing machine and fabric instead of our clay and crayons. Then there was the plastic display case next to the wall, which housed the rocks we children had collected over the years. After that was the mess hall. It smelled like tonight's supper, an algae casserole that was one of Salty Bill's standard meals. No one was around, so I made a quick stop in the kitchen and grabbed a few ginger cookies. Salty Bill didn't like anyone taking food when he wasn't there, but I figured he wouldn't miss them. Then I was in the grown-ups wing. First was Memes's room. I could find my way to it with my eyes closed. When we woke up sick at night, she was the one we went to. Past it was Salty Bill's room. Across from it was Phineas's room. As I passed Eliana and Darby's room, I could hear soft snoring. Eliana had always complained about her husband's snoring, but I never understood what she was talking about. I sure did now. Everyone's rooms were dark except for Cy's. There was light under his door, and I wondered what kept him from sleep. I left the living quarters behind and followed the corridor that led to the work areas. This part of the settlement was usually buzzing with activity. during the day. But in the middle of the night, the only sound was from the air scrubbers humming softly in the background, like a lullaby. I passed the exercise room, Cy's workshop, the sick bay, various workrooms, the generator room, and my favorite, the algae farm. Just past the algae farm was a circular staircase. I climbed up and up and up the bouncing plastic stairs. I was a little out of breath when I finally reached the communications and observation rooms, also known as COR or COR. It was above ground and where we sent and received messages from Earth. The grown-ups jokingly called it the phone booth. The core was the crew's original habitat when they first arrived at Mars. Installed by robots, it was a simple dome-like structure. There was a wide window with a sweeping view of the dusty red Martian landscape. No one spent much time here except for Cy. As commander, he sent situation reports to Earth Command. Also, he could monitor the weather better up here. It was the perfect spot to watch whirling dust devils. I liked the echoes of the room's previous life. Taped on the walls were colorful maps of Earth places: Pennsylvania, Alabama, Alaska, Michigan. It had been tradition for the crew to bring a map from their home state. Then, there were the plastic lockers for the crew members' belongings. They decorated them with stickers and pictures. The front of Cy's locker had a list of all the places he'd visited. Bucket list: Everest, Antarctica, Moon, Mars. Best of all, it was quiet up here. I settled on the couch under the blanket and munched on the cookies. Outside the wide window, Phobos, one of our 2 moons, was a glowing lump in the darkness. Above it was Earth, a bright, shining star. I wondered if the people on Earth thought about us as much as we did about them. Even though I'd seen lots of digipics, I still had a hard time imagining Earth. The pool of endless water called the ocean. The places with trees called forests. And of course, the animals. Phineas had told me about the birds that flew through the sky and made their homes, called nests, in trees high above the ground. As I closed my eyes, with Leo curled at my feet, I felt like a bird in a quiet, safe nest. My home. One that I never ever wanted to leave. Chapter 2, A Good Day. I blinked my eyes open. The dome was bathed in warm pink light. It was morning, and there was something heavy on my chest. Meow! That was Leo. He was sitting on me. Meow, he said again, more loudly. I understood a little cat, and that meant I'm hungry. I guess you want breakfast, I said. Satisfied that I was finally awake, he leapt off me with a swish of his tail, landing with a soft thud on the floor. I stood up and yawned, walking over to the window. The landscape stretched out in varying shades of dusty red as far as I could see. The low-hanging sun was a small dot against a pink sky with wispy blue clouds. Sunrise on Mars was magical. Just beyond the window was our backyard. The swooping craters where we spent hours playing outside while wearing our environmental suits. The lawn chairs and barbecue grill, cobbled together from parts Darby had scavenged from old machines. The grill didn't work, of course. There wasn't enough oxygen in the atmosphere to light a fire. But Darby loved to pose for digipics next to it, wearing his environmental suit. He was goofy like that. Memes said the only thing missing was grass. Phineas explained it was a plant you grew and cut, and then grew again and cut. It didn't make much sense. Off to the side of our yard was the garage, where we stored our 2 rovers, and next to that was the docking station, where the robot-controlled supply ship from Earth that came every 2 years would connect to the settlement. I was already looking forward to the chocolate it would bring. Something caught my eye. A blinking light was moving slowly across the horizon. It was probably a rover from one of the other countries. It was always a little scary to think how close the other settlements were to us. I sometimes wondered what they looked like, as I'd never seen them. We weren't allowed to go past the little cemetery on the edge of our territory. It was far too dangerous. There was a soft ringing in the distance. It was the meal chime. Salty Bill would be setting breakfast out now. After that, it would be morning chores, lessons, lunch, then afternoon chores, free time, supper, then evening chores, and finally bed. The next morning, we would wake up and start the same routine all over again. Cy liked to say a boring day on Mars was a good day. We better get moving, Leo, I said. Yums. It was a baby word I had used for food. Now I used it on Leo. He knew that word and turned toward me. But before I could take a step, it happened. A glowing round object hurtled across the sky. A white-hot tail of light streaking behind it. It crashed far away, waves of bright light exploding around it like a halo. Leo darted under the couch right before the room began to shake. All around me, the room rocked wildly. I tumbled to the ground. Across the room, the desk holding the communications digislate rattled, and the chair in front of it tipped over with a loud crash. Papers on the desk spilled across the floor, and a locker banged open. I decided to stay where I was. It seemed like the safest thing to do. Then, as suddenly as it had started, it was over. Everything was still. I crawled to the window and looked out. A plume of red dust was rising, as if it had been kicked up by whatever had crashed into it. The question was, what had crashed? It had looked like a ship, but not like any ship I had ever seen. It was too round, too glowing, too otherworldly, too alien. Feet pounded up the stairs. Cy burst into the room, worry etched into the lines of his face. He must have been in the middle of shaving. He had green shaving cream on one cheek. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. I shook my head and then remembered. "Leo!" I cried, looking around. Scrambling down to my hands and knees, I peered under the couch. Leo was curled into a tight loaf and stared back at me. I tugged him out, checking him over. He seemed fine. The people were running into the room. Darby and Eliana, Trey, Flossie, Vera, and Albie. Albie looked half awake, his ball cap on backward. "Sit rep," Cy barked. It was short for Situation Report, and was his way of asking what had happened. "Something crashed," I said, pointing out the window. "I think it was an alien ship." Everyone looked at me as if I was the alien. Everyone except Trey. He and I had always been fascinated by aliens and monsters. We watched every digireel in our collection that featured them. "Alien?" Trey asked, eyes widening. I nodded. "Belle," Cy said, shaking his head, "there's no such thing as aliens." Technically, he was right. We had colonized the moon and begun to settle Mars. In all that time, we hadn't encountered alien life. But I knew aliens existed. Why wouldn't there be something else besides us out here? It just made sense. There were hundreds of billions of galaxies. Surely one of them had intelligent life. Maybe even alien cats. Memes ran in carrying her portable med kit. She was wearing her bathrobe, and her short gray hair was wet and plastered to her head. "What happened?" she asked urgently. "Something crashed," Flossie said. "He thinks it was an alien ship," Trey added. "It was definitely an alien ship," I said. Memes pushed her way forward with her medkit, her pale eyes filled with worry. "Did you hit your head, Belle?" she asked, her hand in my hair, feeling for bumps. "No," I said, shaking her off. "I'm fine." "But this silly talk of aliens. I saw the ship." "Describe exactly what you saw," she said, like I was describing symptoms. She was our doctor, after all. So I did. I described the circle of light, the bright white tail, the explosion, how everything shook, and Leo was terrified. "I see," she said, and looked up at Cy. Cy was rubbing his gray beard, which he did when he was trying to puzzle something out. There were still bits of shaving cream on his face, but he didn't seem to notice. Sounds like a meteorite, Eliana said. She was wearing her usual cargo shorts and t-shirt. She liked to wear shorts because she was in and out of environmental suits all day and got hot. But it glowed, I said. That's what meteors do when they entered the atmosphere, she explained. I'm pretty sure one crashed when you said you'd marry me, Peanut Butter, Darby teased, winking at his wife. Or maybe that was my heart exploding from happiness. She rolled her eyes at me. Really, Jelly? Peanut Butter and Jelly were their silly pet names for each other. They had fallen in love on the moon, and Cy said he'd recruited them to Mars as a package deal. Eliana was super smart. She had helped design the lunar settlement. Darby called himself a jack of all trades. Let me through, a voice called loudly. Phineas was pushing up to the front with his cane. He was old and moved slowly, but he had a way of making himself heard. He walked to the window and stared out at the plume of dust. Whatever it was, it landed near the French settlement, Phineas said, pointing his cane. We need to contact them to see if they're all right. Absolutely not, Cy said in a firm voice, crossing his arms. Cy, Meme said, maybe we should go take a look. It's not our territory, it's not our problem. You know the rules. There were lots of rules. They said it was because Mars was dangerous. I knew them by heart. We all did. They were impossible to miss. The grown-ups had taped them in front of the toilet in our bathroom. Settlement rules. Do not go outside without a buddy. Use the alarm bell in an emergency. Keep a glow stick in your pocket. Rovers are off limits for children. Do not go beyond the flag. No contact with foreign countries. Ever. Beneath the typed rules, someone, probably Vera, had added, always put the seat down on the toilet. That's a good one to remember, I think. Vera, who never missed a chance to argue, asked, why can't we go see what it is? Because it's too dangerous, Cy said. Yeah, it's too dangerous, Albie echoed. You just say whatever Cy says, Vera snapped at him. What if someone's hurt? Phineas asked. And then everyone was talking at once, the voices getting louder and louder, and I couldn't tell who was speaking. A loud whistle pierced the noise. I turned to see Salty Bill in the doorway, wearing his apron and holding a plastic whistle. He had a kerchief tied over his head, and his long gray ponytail dangled beneath. What's the ruckus? He hollered as the room fell silent. An alien ship crashed over there, I said. It was a meteorite, Cy said. Salty Bill just shook his head. I don't care if a pterodactyl flew out of a black hole and landed here. I'm serving breakfast in 5 minutes. It's the only meal you're getting until lunch, he announced. Salty Bill turned and stomped out of the room. Everyone looked around for a minute and then followed him out. Aliens or no aliens, no one ever missed a meal on Mars.